Jak Riven had always wondered what alien bones would feel like under his ass. Not in the weird way, he wasn't some xenophile fetishist from the outer colonies, but in the "I'm sitting on a chair made of literal alien remains" way. Turns out, surprisingly comfortable. Almost ergonomic, if ergonomics included spinal columns that curved in ways human spines absolutely shouldn't. You realize you're desecrating what's probably their equivalent of the Vatican, right? Elyse's voice echoed through the massive chamber, bouncing off crystalline walls that refracted the portable lights in prismatic patterns. Her environmental suit made soft whirring noises as she catalogued artifacts, her expression hidden behind the reflective visor. Technically, Jak replied, shifting slightly on the bone throne, according to corporate salvage law, I'm conducting a thorough assessment of recoverable assets. He gestured grandly around the cavernous hull. Besides, they've been dead for at least 30,000 years. I doubt they're filing complaints about my sitting arrangements. The chamber stretched around them in impossible geometries, a cathedral built by minds that thought in dimensions humans only theorized about. The throne sat at the center of it all, an elaborate construction of fossilized bones, minerals, and what appeared to be technological components so seamlessly integrated that they might as well have grown that way naturally. Nova Corp didn't send us to play Indiana Jones on negative 2,971 Hong Kong dollars, Elyse reminded him, her attention fixed on a crystalline panel embedded in one wall. They sent us to evaluate whether this place is worth the investment of a full xenoarchaeological team. She paused, running her scanner over symbols etched into the surface. And I'm pretty sure sitting on the artifacts wasn't in the mission parameters. Nova Corp, Jak said, mimicking their employer's corporate jingle, harvesting the universe so you don't have to. He ran his fingers along the bone armrests, feeling microscopic engravings he couldn't see. Bet they'd pay top credit to export this bad boy. Imagine this in some CEO's office. Ultimate power move during board meetings. Ravi's voice crackled through their comms. Thermal readings are still fluctuating down there. You picking up anything unusual? The ship's sensors are detecting energy signatures that don't match any known patterns. Nothing trying to kill us yet, Jak replied, which puts this alien ruin ahead of our last 3 expeditions. Don't jinx it, Elyse muttered. Jak had been on 17 salvage operations for Nova Corporation. Most involved dead worlds, abandoned habitats, or derelict ships. Good money in stripping the past to build the future. But negative 2,971 Hong Kong dollars was different. The planet itself was unremarkable, another rocky world orbiting another unremarkable star. But scans had detected massive underground structures unlike anything in the company database. They'd found the entrance 3 days ago. A vertical shaft descending 2 kilometers beneath the surface, spiraling down into darkness. The architecture defied conventional engineering principles, with support structures that seemed to ignore basic physics. And now they'd reached what appeared to be some kind of central chamber, dominated by the throne upon which Jak currently sat. I'm getting some weird readings from your vitals, Ravi said, concern edging his usually unflappable voice. Heart rate elevated, neural activity spiking. You sure everything's okay down there? Jak frowned. He felt fine. Better than fine, actually. A pleasant warmth had been spreading through his body since he'd sat down, like slipping into a perfectly heated bath. Probably just equipment malfunction. You know how finicky these portable scanners get around unknown materials. Yeah, must be the interference, Ravi agreed, though he didn't sound convinced. Keep an eye on each other, okay? Protocol says. If anyone starts speaking in tongues or growing extra appendages, shoot them and run, Jak finished. Corporate Safety Guidelines, Section 12, Subsection 9, Dealing with Potential Xenobiological Contamination. I've read the manual. Just be careful, Ravi said before cutting the connection. Elyse approached the throne, her scanner aimed at Jak now instead of the walls. Maybe you should get up. Those readings are strange. In a minute, Jak said, though he wasn't sure why he was reluctant to move. The warmth had intensified, concentrating around his spine and the base of his skull. Not uncomfortable, just present. I think it's reacting to me. That's precisely what worries me, Elyse replied, her voice tight. 30,000-year-old alien technology shouldn't be reacting to anything. Jak closed his eyes, just for a moment. And that's when the images started. A civilization that lived in symbiosis with their technology. Bones and circuits growing together, evolving alongside one another. Cities that breathed. Buildings with circulatory systems. Not separate from their technology but integrated with it completely. And war. Always war. The inevitable result of expansion and resource competition. Jak. Elyse's voice seemed distant. Jak, your nose is bleeding. He opened his eyes to see her standing directly in front of him, visor retracted, concern etched across her face. He could feel the warm trickle of blood down his upper lip. I saw them, he whispered. The ones who built this place. They called themselves, the word that came to mind was unpronounceable, a sound that human vocal cords couldn't produce. The Shapers. They shaped living matter and technology into a single unified system. Elyse's eyes widened. How could you possibly know that? He gestured to the throne. It's some kind of information repository. Neural interface. It's showing me everything. He wiped the blood from his nose with the back of his hand. Their entire civilization history. Their rise, their wars, their fall. Get off that thing right now, Elyse demanded, grabbing his arm. Jak pulled back, suddenly defensive. This is the find of the century, Elyse. Do you have any idea what this technology is worth? Nova would pay billions for this. We'd never have to work again. That's the chair talking, not you, she said, her hand hovering near the sidearm strapped to her thigh. You're being influenced. Maybe she was right. Jak couldn't remember ever feeling this possessive about a salvage find before. Usually, he was happy to tag it, bag it, and let the corporate Xenotech divisions figure out what to do with it. But this was different. He felt connected to the throne, as if removing himself from it would be like tearing off a limb. Just give me a few more minutes, he said, trying to sound reasonable. The information I'm getting could be crucial for understanding this place. Elyse hesitated, then dropped her hand from her weapon. 5 minutes. Then we call Ravi for extraction and wait for the full science team. Deal. Deal, Jak agreed, closing his eyes again. The visions resumed immediately, but sharper now, more focused. He saw the Shapers at the height of their power, spreading across their star system, reshaping worlds to suit their needs. Their technology allowed them to manipulate organic matter at the molecular level, creating living architecture, biological computers, ships grown rather than built. But there were factions, disagreements about how this power should be used. Some believed in preservation, minimal intervention. Others pushed for aggressive terraforming, complete environmental control. The wars that followed lasted generations. Weapons that corrupted the very code of life. Worlds rendered uninhabitable. And finally, a desperate plan by the last survivors, the construction of sanctuaries like this one, buried deep beneath planetary surfaces, where the final remnants of their civilization could be preserved until it was safe to emerge. Except they never did emerge. Something had gone wrong. Jak gasped as the final images flooded his mind. The sanctuary's life support systems failing. The survivors realizing they were trapped. Their last act, converting their own bodies into the very information storage system he now sat upon, preserving not just their knowledge but their consciousness. He wasn't sitting on a throne made of bones. He was sitting on the last remains of an entire civilization, their minds and memories encoded into their very physical structure. And they were waking up. Elyse, he said hoarsely, we need to leave. Now. But when he opened his eyes, Elyse wasn't alone anymore. 4 other members of their crew stood in the chamber. Ravi, Chen, Decker, and Powell, all wearing environmental suits, all with weapons drawn. "Step away from the artifact, Jak," Ravi said, his voice hard and unfamiliar. "What are you doing here?" Jak asked, confused. "You're supposed to be monitoring from the ship." "Change of plans," Ravi replied. "Nova Corp sent updated instructions after your last transmission. This site has been redesignated as a Class 1 retrieval priority." Class 1. Jak knew what that meant. Maximum value. Minimum witnesses. "You're going to kill us," he said, the realization settling like ice in his stomach. "Erase any record of what we found so Nova can claim exclusive rights." Ravi's expression didn't change. "Nothing personal. Just business. We've been working together for 3 years. Elyse protested. "And I've been working for Nova for 15, Ravi replied. "You know how this game is played. Unique Xenotech means trillions in patents. Can't have competing claims." Jak's mind raced. The throne was still feeding him information, but differently now, not just history but capabilities. Systems. Functions. Like an instruction manual being downloaded directly into his brain. "I understand," he said slowly, raising his hands. "At least let me preserve the data I've collected. It would be a shame to lose the historical records." He reached for the portable scanner at his belt. "Don't move." Decker barked, raising his weapon higher. "Easy," Jak said, forcing a smile. "Just accessing my scanner. Corporate protocol, remember? All finds must be properly documented before removal or destruction." His fingers found the device, but instead of activating the standard scanning function, he pressed a sequence he somehow knew would interface with the throne's systems. A soft hum filled the chamber, barely perceptible at first but quickly growing in intensity. "What are you doing?" Ravi demanded as the crystalline walls began to pulse with light. "Introducing myself to our hosts," Jak replied. "Turns out they're not as dead as we thought." The bones of the throne shifted beneath him, reconfiguring themselves with a series of clicks and snaps. Jak felt no fear, only a strange sense of rightness as tendrils of ossified material extended from the armrests, wrapping around his wrists like bracelets. The others backed away, weapons wavering between Jak and the walls, which were now visibly moving, flowing like liquid despite their crystalline appearance. "The Shapers had a saying," Jak said, his voice taking on a resonant quality that wasn't entirely his own. "The body is temporary, but the pattern endures." "Shoot him!" Ravi shouted. Too late. The chamber itself seemed to come alive, the floor rippling beneath their feet. Crystalline spikes erupted from the walls, impaling Decker and Powell before they could fire a shot. Chen managed to get off a wild blast that dissipated harmlessly against the ceiling before similar spikes punched through his environmental suit. Ravi turned to run, but the entrance sealed itself, the material flowing like mercury to create a seamless wall. He spun back, firing desperately at Jak and the throne. The energy bolts never reached their target. They froze in mid-air, suspended in crystalline structures that grew around them, encasing the destructive energy like insects in amber. "What the hell are you?" Ravi whispered, backing against the wall as his weapon's charge depleted. Jak tilted his head, considering the question. He didn't feel entirely like himself anymore. The knowledge of the Shapers was flowing through him, changing him, but he wasn't fighting it. It felt like finally understanding a language he'd been hearing his entire life. "I'm what comes next," he said simply. The wall behind Ravi liquefied, engulfing him before he could scream. His body collapsed as if all the bones had suddenly been removed, leaving only a heap of flesh and environmental suit. Elyse stood frozen, the only one left, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. "Jak, please," she whispered. "This isn't you." He studied her, seeing both with his human eyes and with senses he'd never possessed before. He could perceive the electrical patterns of her nervous system, the unique signature of her DNA, the specific way her atoms vibrated, a pattern unlike any other in the universe. "You're right," he said finally. "I'm not entirely Jak anymore. But I'm not entirely not Jak either." He gestured to the carnage around them. "They were going to kill us both. You know that." "And what happens now?" she asked, her voice steadying despite her fear. "What happens to me?" The question hung in the air between them as the chamber continued to transform, the alien technology fully awakened after 30,000 years of dormancy. "That," Jak said, "depends on what you want to happen next." Elyse lowered her weapon, calculating her chances. The chamber was sealed. The others were dead. And Jak, or whatever Jak was becoming, controlled every molecule of this place. "I want to live," she said simply. "And I want to understand what's happening to you." Jak's eyes had changed, she noticed. Still physically the same, but something moved behind them now, like patterns of light seen through water. His posture had shifted too, more precise, less human. The blood from his nose had dried, leaving a rust-colored streak across his upper lip. "You ever wonder why humans explore?" he asked, his voice carrying new harmonics. "We tell ourselves it's curiosity, the search for knowledge. But it's always been about exploitation. Find new worlds, new resources, new people, convert them into something we can use." The throne continued to reshape itself around him, bone flowing like clay, circuitry glittering along its surface. "Nova Corp followed us here because their deep space scans detected neural-level biomechanical integration technology. Do you understand what that's worth? Brain-machine interfaces that grow with you, that become part of your cellular structure." "How do you know that?" Elyse stepped closer, fascination temporarily overriding fear. "Did the throne tell you?" Jak tapped his temple. "I have access to everything now. Nova Corp's encrypted communications. The Shaper's complete technological archive. The contents of your personal data cache." He smiled apologetically. "Including those simulation novels you keep hidden in your private server. The ones with the tentacles." Elyse felt heat rush to her face. "You're invading my privacy." "Sorry. Still figuring out the boundaries of this connection." He gestured vaguely at his head. "It's like suddenly having 1,000 simultaneous conversations in your brain. Hard to sort what I should and shouldn't know." The chamber had stopped its violent reconfiguration, settling into a new form. The crystalline walls now pulsed with bioluminescence in patterns that seemed almost like breathing. The floor had grown what looked like furniture, organic curves of bone and crystal forming seats and tables. "They were magnificent, you know," Jak said, his gaze distant. "The Shapers. They didn't see technology as something separate from nature. To them, it was all part of the same evolutionary process. Living circuits. Thinking buildings. Cities with immune systems. And yet they still managed to drive themselves extinct," Elyse pointed out. "Not extinct. Transformed." Jak held up his hand, watching as the skin rippled, momentarily transparent enough to reveal the bones beneath, which seemed to shimmer with embedded circuitry. They reached a point where distinction between biology and technology became meaningless. But they were still people, with all the flaws that entails. Tribal thinking. Resource competition. Fear of otherness. He let his hand drop. "Sound familiar? So what do these Shapers want now?" Elyse asked, glancing nervously at the remains of their crewmates. "Revenge?" Jak laughed, a startlingly human sound among the alienness. "They're not some monolithic hive mind, Elyse. They were individuals, just like us. With different beliefs, different goals. The ones who created this sanctuary wanted preservation, not destruction. They wanted to survive. And now they're inside you. Changing you." "Not exactly. Jak frowned, seemingly struggling to articulate the concept. It's more like, they created a system that could integrate with compatible neural structures. Mine happened to be suitable. But I'm not being replaced or controlled. I'm being expanded. Elyse's scientific curiosity was fully engaged now, momentarily eclipsing her survival instincts. That shouldn't be possible. Cross-species neural compatibility? The odds against it are astronomical. Jak's expression turned enigmatic. Unless it's not a coincidence. Unless humanity was deliberately seeded with compatible genetic markers 50,000 years ago by shapers who visited Earth. That would rewrite human history, Elyse whispered. Oh, it gets better, Jak said, standing from the throne for the first time. He moved differently now, with a fluid grace that seemed uncanny. Nova Corp didn't stumble across this place by accident. They've known about the shapers for decades. Been hunting their technology across multiple star systems. The implications hit Elyse like a physical blow. You're saying someone at Nova deliberately sent us here? As what, test subjects? More like sacrificial lambs. Jak walked to one of the crystalline walls, placing his palm against it. The material responded to his touch, rippling outward in concentric circles. They needed someone to activate the systems, to prove the technology was still viable. Then they'd sweep in, eliminate the witnesses, and claim the discovery. But how could they know you'd be compatible? Everyone on our crew was selected for specific genetic markers. That's why Nova insisted on those extensive medical screenings before each mission. They were mapping our neural patterns, looking for compatibility with shaper tech. And you won the genetic lottery, Elyse said bitterly. Not just me. Jak turned to face her. You too, Elyse. That's why you're still alive. The sanctuary recognized your potential. Before she could process this revelation, a deep rumble shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling as the vibrations intensified. What's happening? Elyse steadied herself against one of the bone tables. Jak closed his eyes briefly, as if listening to something she couldn't hear. Nova's backup plan. Since they lost contact with Ravi's team, they've initiated orbital bombardment. They'd rather destroy this place than risk losing control of it. They're bombing us from orbit. That's insane. The archaeological value alone is nothing compared to the military applications, Jak finished. If they can't have it, no one can. Another impact, closer this time. The crystalline ceiling cracked, raining glittering fragments. We need to get to the ship, Elyse said, already moving toward where the entrance had been before it sealed. There's no time. Jak's voice was calm. And the ship's already been destroyed. First target in their bombardment pattern. Then we're trapped. Elyse felt panic rising in her chest. We're going to die here. Not necessarily. Jak returned to the throne, placing his hands on the armrests. The sanctuary has defenses. And transportation systems. The throne began to glow with inner light, the bones now almost translucent, revealing complex circuitry within. The entire chamber trembled, but not from the bombardment, from power building within the walls themselves. What are you doing? Elyse asked. Waking up the rest of the sanctuary. Jak's eyes had gone completely luminous now, shining with the same light as the throne. It's much bigger than this chamber. It extends throughout the entire planetary crust. The floor beneath them began to shift, forming a depression around the throne that deepened into a pit. From this pit rose what appeared to be a console of some kind, made of the same bone crystal composite as everything else. It sprouted before Jak like a rapidly growing plant, unfurling into a complex interface. This is a shaper seed ship, he explained, his fingers dancing across the console's surface. One of many they sent out during their final days. Not just an archive, but a means of rebuilding their civilization. And that's what you're planning to do? Resurrect an alien species that destroyed itself? Elyse couldn't keep the alarm from her voice. Not resurrect. Evolve. Jak looked up from the console, his expression softening slightly. The Shaper's mistake was thinking they could remain isolated, unchanged. They tried to preserve themselves exactly as they were, refusing to adapt. That's not what I'm proposing. Another impact rocked the chamber, this one close enough that a section of the ceiling collapsed entirely, revealing the shaft they had descended through hours earlier. Through the opening, Elyse could see flashes of light as Nova Corp's weapons pounded the planet's surface. "We're out of time," Jak said. "I need your decision." "My decision?" Elyse repeated, confused. "Whether you want to stay as you are, human, separate, vulnerable. Or whether you're willing to become something more." He held out his hand to her. "The sanctuary can protect us, but only if we fully integrate with its systems. You're asking me to become like you. Part human, part, whatever the Shapers were. I'm asking you to evolve. To help create something that might actually survive the pattern of destruction humanity seems determined to repeat." His outstretched hand remained steady despite the chaos around them. "It's your choice. I won't force it on you." The thunderous sounds of bombardment grew closer. Soon the entire structure would collapse. Elyse looked at Jak, her colleague, her friend, now something more than human yet still recognizably himself. "Will I still be me?" she asked, her voice small against the cacophony of destruction. "You'll be you, plus possibilities you can't yet imagine," Jak promised. "The pattern endures, Elyse. That's what the Shapers discovered. Consciousness, personality, identity, these things transcend the medium that carries them." Another impact, massive enough to throw Elyse to her knees. The chamber was breaking apart around them. Through newly formed cracks in the walls, she could see strange machinery awakening, pulsing with the same bioluminescence as the throne. "Decide now," Jak urged, still eerily calm amid the disintegration. Elyse reached for his hand. Their fingers touched. The world exploded into light and sensation. Elyse felt her consciousness expanding outward, connecting to systems throughout the planet. She could perceive the Nova Corp ships in orbit, their weapons raining destruction. She could feel the sanctuary's defenses activating, ancient technologies responding to her and Jak's combined direction. And beneath it all, she sensed the Shapers, not as invaders in her mind, but as teachers, guides, their accumulated knowledge becoming accessible like books in a vast library. Their individual personalities preserved but subdued, waiting to be consulted rather than imposing their will. "It's beautiful," she whispered, though she was no longer sure she was speaking with her physical voice. "It's just the beginning," Jak replied, his consciousness now intertwined with hers in the sanctuary's network. "Look deeper." She did, extending her awareness further into the planet's systems. And there she found it, the seed ship's true purpose. Not just an archive or a sanctuary, but a vessel capable of interstellar travel. The entire structure could detach from the planet's crust, propelled by technologies humans had barely begun to theorize about. "We can leave," she realized. "Escape the bombardment. And go where humanity hasn't yet reached," Jak confirmed. "Find a place to grow something new. Something better." The sanctuary shuddered as its deepest systems activated, massive engines that had lain dormant for millennia coming online. The structure began to detach from the surrounding rock, rising through the planet's crust. In orbit, the Nova Corp battleships detected the massive energy surge too late. By the time they redirected their weapons, the seed ship had already breached the surface, a massive crystalline structure emerging from the planet like a butterfly from a chrysalis. Inside what had once been the throne chamber, now the ship's control center, Jak and Elyse existed in a state beyond their former humanity. Their physical bodies remained, but transformed, integrated with the ship's systems, their consciousness expanded to encompass the entire vessel. They felt no remorse as they left the Nova Corp ships behind, accelerating toward the edge of the star system. Those ships represented everything they were leaving behind: exploitation, destruction, the relentless consumption of resources without thought for consequences. Where should we go? Elyse asked, her consciousness brushing against Jak's in the ship's network. Jak considered, accessing the Shaper's star charts, which had been updated with observations made during their long dormancy. Somewhere isolated. Unclaimed. A place where we can build without interference. And then what? The question contained all her uncertainty about their future, about what they were becoming. Then we create something new, Jak replied. Not human. Not Shaper. Something that takes the best of both and evolves beyond either. The seed ship accelerated to faster-than-light speeds, leaving the star system behind in a flash of distorted spacetime. Inside, Jak and Elyse began the process of understanding what they had become, and what they might yet be. In time, others would join them. Explorers, outcasts, those seeking something beyond what humanity offered. Some by choice, some by necessity. Each adding their unique pattern to the evolving synthesis. And decades later, when Nova Corp finally tracked them down, sending a battle fleet to reclaim the technology they considered rightfully theirs, they would find not a hidden sanctuary but a thriving civilization. Not human, not alien, but something unprecedented, a true symbiosis of biology and technology, of individual and community, of consciousness and creation. The Nova Corp admiral stood on his flagship's bridge, staring at the viewscreen in disbelief. Where they had expected to find a single seed ship, they instead faced an entire star system transformed. Planets encased in crystalline megastructures. Artificial worlds constructed from asteroid material. Ships that seemed alive, moving with organic grace through the void. And at the center of it all, a massive structure that resembled nothing so much as a throne big enough to encompass worlds, made from the transformed remnants of what had once been merely human. Open a channel, the admiral ordered, his voice hoarse. The communications officer complied, and a moment later, the viewscreen shifted to show a figure that was both familiar and utterly alien. Recognizably once human, but evolved far beyond those origins. "Welcome, Admiral Chen," said the being that had once been Jak Riven. "We've been expecting you." Beside him stood another figure, equally transformed, her eyes containing the light of stars. "We saved you a seat," said the entity that had once been Elyse, gesturing to the space around them, a sacred hall built from the bones of old limitations, old thinking. The admiral stared, understanding for the first time what they had found, not a technology to be exploited, but a future they could barely comprehend. "What are you?" he whispered. Jak and Elyse exchanged a glance that contained multitudes, a silent communication no unmodified human could have understood. "We are what comes next," they answered in unison. "The pattern endures." And in the shadow of their bone throne, the future began.